Hello, this is Nick from Gorgon Reviews, and I am speaking to Juan Felipe Zuleta, director of the film Unidentified Objects. Unidentified Objects, which is like UFO without the F for flying, is a story of two very different individuals going on a road trip that only one of them really wanted to be on, with the hopes of meeting up with the actual aliens in Canada. So thank you so much for spending time here, Juan. I know you're busy with your film premiering in Texas for the first time at Fantastic Fest this week. And
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to meet you and to be here.
First up, I always like to ask questions to get to know the director better. And so first off, do you know and remember the first film you saw in theaters growing up?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think. The first movie I saw in theaters, I gotta say, it's gotta be like, or at least the ones that I have the most memory, like the most clear memory, I think is The Matrix. The Matrix. I like that I remember clearly because I was born in '94, and that movie truly impacted me. Like when I saw it, and I remember seeing that in theater. So I was pretty young, but that movie is unforgettable when you watch it in a theater.
Yeah, for a 5 or 6-year-old at the time.
Yeah. See, I was 6 or 7 years old, or maybe it was the second Matrix, but it was one of the Matrix movies, and I remember watching that in theater and being like, "Whoa!"
Nice. Was there a specific moment in your life where you decided you wanted to direct movies?
Yes, I was 16. It was like 2011, 2000, like around that time. I already had an affinity for cinema. I loved movies. I was watching a lot of movies every single day. When I could, I would watch movies, and I was just obsessed with storytelling and like what movies did to you. But where I'm from, there's really not a lot of filmmakers, or there's really like if you look in the US, the amount of festivals, reviews, like groups, like even in films, even in schools and even in high schools, there's like a film club or stuff like that. I never really had that growing up. So for me, it was more of a journey of like the moment I decided to like shoot my first short film, because I wanted to see how the experience was the first real experience where I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Even though the short film sucks and is really bad, I was like, the process of making it, the process of like trying to find actors, trying to understand what you wanted to tell, and trying to tell something cinematically. And since then, I never stopped. Like, but I think I decided to be a film director when I was like 17, 16 years old, my junior year of high school. And that's where everything changed, because before I was going to be a naval engineer. I love boats, and I love sailboats, and I sail.
Was there any film in particular that also encouraged you at that time? You saw something, you're like, I can do this.
I think a lot of films. I think there's a combination of American cinema, like the Steven Spielberg movies I would watch at like theaters, obviously like discovering Stanley Kubrick and the great filmmakers, like watching The Godfather, like that, all of that journey of like watching great, like Brian De Palma, like watching like American Beauty when I was young, like watching a lot of American movies. But there was also like a part, like looking back, that I definitely influenced me significantly. And it was my dad would take me to a local small film festival in Medellin. We're not a film festival, but it was like it was like the only place where would they show foreign films in my hometown. And sometimes they would show like, and I remember watching like Vittorio De Sica movies there, like and watching like The Bicycle Thieves and movies that were starring and that those movies are easier to digest because they are like they look very simple, and they don't have like the VFX or the complexities of some of the American movies, but they're very charged with like from a cinematic standpoint, they have a lot to offer with a lot of emotion, a lot of like they leave you thinking. So I think a combination of all of that, and the influence of my brother. My brother wanted to be a movie composer, and he's older than me. Kind of like all of those three things like showed me that it was possible to be a filmmaker.
You already mentioned that you just went and made a short and described it as terrible yourself, but Do you think any of your many shorts you made before this movie, since this is your first feature-length film, did any short in particular help prepare you the most for a bigger project like this?
Every single one of them. I can stress enough how important it is to make short films. Every single short film is a massive lesson because in short films you make mistakes, and you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna not get what you want, and you're not gonna cast well, and you're not gonna find the right location, and you're gonna maybe like lose the footage at some point, or like so the more and there's this barrier of making that you have to pass till you get to a point where you start liking what you're doing, or because filmmakers, if you're a filmmaker, you care about you there's a level of taste that you gotta have. There's a level of there's a palette of oh yeah, I want to pick the camera and I want to point it in this direction, and I want to put this actor in that scene, and I want it to feel that like this. So then you start caring about those elements. But there's after making all those short films, there's a point where you realize that where you start having a little bit of more understanding of how things can work and cannot work, or a little bit of more of more confidence in how you manage that chaos, because you're really never gonna have control when you make a movie. You're never really gonna have full control. It's more of like managing the anxiety, managing the pressures that come with filmmaking, and knowing what is priority and what is important, and prioritizing that and making it. And that's kind of like, so every short film I ever made taught me something.
You worked with Leland Frankel. Did I pronounce that one right?
Yeah.
On writing this movie, it says he made the story, but it was written by him, but you both worked on the story. How did that process work?
He would write, so he and I are collaborators. He would write 5 pages a day. He would send them to me. It was during COVID. We started writing the screenplay. We were both unemployed. We were both going through harsh times in our lives. So when we wrote the first treatment, we wrote it together, and we developed like beat sheet of everything. We developed a character sheet for each character, like a couple pages, maybe 3 or 4 pages describing who the characters were. I like to write the characters' secrets and stuff like that, and like what each character has in common, and what differentiates them. And then after that, he started writing the screenplay, and he would write 5 pages a day. He would send them to me. I would read them, rewrite or give him feedback, and that's how the process with Unidentified Objects went, which was fascinating and incredibly rewarding. And we actually wrote the first full feature-length draft in under a month, which is crazy.
And the lead role, played by Matthew Jeffers, was always intended to be played by a little person. And how important was it for you for this film, for that to be true?
It was always intended to be a little person, and it was the most important thing, because for me, from cinema study classes in college and things like that, you kind of like realize that obviously representation in cinema is kind of important to a certain degree, right? It's very important to be able to tell stories from people who, or like build from yourself, and try to understand it, and to also keep in mind that there's actors or the performance, depending on the story, that you can, like, if you look at the show Hamilton, the Broadway show, if you look at there's something interesting there of like how casting, how there's a much bigger, wider pool of actors out there than just your typical like Hollywood like white stars, right? Like, and so that was something that in the past 20 years I kind of learned and understood. But one character that was fascinating to me were the little people performance, and I actually had these on my notes. I have like notebooks with notes where I write everything. And it's just fascinating because little people are always portrayed, from 99% of projects that they're portrayed as like the freaks. They're portrayed as like these little things that they don't have a personality. They're not two-dimensional. They don't have emotions. They're very like, that's it. There's like the object that they're throwing at the office. That's who the little people actor is, and that has been an industry of employment for little people throughout history in cinema and in entertainment. So knowing that and being an immigrant and understanding, I was just fascinated by what is the experience what is the perspective a little person has of the world, and just as from that fascination and knowing that there's a wide pool of very talented little people, actors out there, it came from like an urge to explore that character, and by doing so, you understand, you can relate to a lot of their struggle of like being outsiders, of not being accepted, of being like marginalized in a certain degree, of not being like your typical status quo character, so you end up discovering the universal themes. And Unidentified Objects, it is an alien movie, but it's an exploration of the word alien through identity, through science fiction, you know what I mean, through different lenses. So yeah, we knew from the beginning it was a little person, and that came pretty early on, just from a curiosity standpoint, from notes, from like a character study standpoint.
And on a similar note, your co-lead Sarah Hay played also a very complex character. And if I were to just describe her, it would sound like a standard kind of goofy sidekick character, you know, one that believed in aliens and wanted to go on this trip, a little eccentric. In movies, usually that character is really easy to make fun of. But with the writing and the way this was shot, she was very much also a sympathetic character. How hard did you find that to balance at the same time?
Casting. It was as hard as finding the actor to play it. Mm-hmm. Like it's one of those characters that it clicks. It clicked the moment I did a chemistry between both of them, and I don't like to like when it comes to storytelling, I try to build everything from a character standpoint. I try to build it from the honesty of who the character is, and truly try to connect with that soul, with that core. So it was easy once I found Sarah Hay as an actress, and I did a chemistry read with Matthew, and her personality already was rebuilding a lot of that, like almost like free-spirited, like object of that is constantly moving. And while the character of Peter is almost like this rock who doesn't move, and who's also like on his own shells and layers of shells. So when you put those two things together, for me, it was more interesting to explore that relationship and how that turns into a platonic love story of friends. So yeah, I think it's casting, to be honest. I gotta give a lot of the credit to Sarah Hay, because she brought something to that character that made it unique. And obviously a lot of the conversations and the common ground and the trust we built amongst each other and we built on set allowed her to truly like explore. In some ways, Winona is like this vision of that Peter is having. It's almost like this mirage. There's a sense of ambiguity and mystery to her. And I think that helps play with that she's not just your goofball character that you can see through, but there's layers to her that allow her to be almost like an invisible cloak that you're trying to identify and figure out who she is throughout. And that helps.
All right, I got two probably quicker ones. What message are you hoping viewers will take away from your film?
That nobody is alone in the universe.
And now that you've finished making your first feature-length movie and are premiering it all over, do you have any plans already for future film ideas?
I have two feature films. One, I wanted to make it in Spanish. It's called We Were Born Dead, and it's the story of two siblings living in the borderline of a small town in Colombia, or a small town in South America, and one day their mom goes missing. So it's in many ways a Guillermo del Toro Civil War inspired movie of these two kids trying to find out what happens to their mother, becoming into a little bit of a investigation psychological thriller through the eyes of children in South America. And I found that incredibly interesting, because it's kind of like you can do a lot when you're looking through the eyes of innocence and through the eyes where everything is possible, right? Where there's no there's no like rules that have been set to society. You still have like an imagination that can go anywhere. And then my second movie is untitled. I cannot tell you much yet, but Leland and I are about to complete our first screenplay, our first draft of an artificial intelligence kind of like a feature film that it technically takes place on the post Jim Crow, call it like that, or the moment where AI is granted their first set of rights. You know what I mean? So like right now, most AI movies right now are talking about if AI is actually AI. If you look at Ex Machina, it's about the Turing test, right? If you look at movies like that, this movie of ours is okay. We've passed that. Let's assume AI is conscious. So how do we incorporate it into society? And it's a small character-driven psychological thriller drama about an artificial intelligence character.
All right. Well, thank you once again. Thank you for spending so much time answering questions about directing the movie Unidentified Objects. It makes its Texas premiere on this Friday, September 23rd, during Fantastic Fest. And I'll play a couple more times during the festival. I personally loved it, so I can't wait to see what comes next. Have a great day.
Are you gonna be at Fantastic Fest?
No, right now I'm in Washington.
Okay.
So I won't be there physically.
But thank you so much, Nick. Thank you for watching our movie and for interviewing me. It means a lot.